You felt watched before anyone ever told you that you were seen. Not by people, by something else. You walk into rooms and the atmosphere shifts. Conversations pause. Energy tightens. You feel pressure without proof, attention without invitation. And you wondered if it was paranoia. It is not. You are not ordinary. You never have been. You carry light that disrupts systems. You carry frequency that exposes hidden agendas. And when light enters a territory ruled by shadow reacts. Have you noticed that the warfare around you is disproportionate? That the resistance feels organized, strategic? That is not coincidence. It is confirmation. There are forces assigned to observe rising souls, to monitor, to analyze, to look for weakness. But here is what you were never told. You are not unguarded. Angels do not shield the chosen randomly. They shield you intentionally, strategically, with design, and they do not use passive protection. They deploy living symbols, spiritual forces, creatures that carry authority embedded in their nature. There are 9 creatures assigned in different seasons of your life. 9. Not to make you comfortable, to make you untouchable. Not everyone will understand this. Only the chosen recognize this language. If you feel this stirring in your spirit, you already know this message found you on purpose. Stay alert, stay present. And if this confirms what your soul has always sensed, anchor yourself here. This is not entertainment. This is alignment. First, the Watchful Lion. You have felt the tension around your presence, the subtle hostility, the silent competition, the way some people study you instead of simply meeting you. That is because something about you triggers surveillance. But listen carefully. The lion assigned to you is not gentle imagery. It is territorial authority. It does not decorate your life. It governs your atmosphere. When unseen eyes attempt to track you, the lion tracks them back. You may not hear its roar, but darkness does. And that roar is not sound. It is rank. It is hierarchy. It is a declaration in the spirit realm that says this territory is claimed. Have you ever noticed that attacks against you collapse suddenly? That people who tried to undermine you lose momentum? That gossip turns against its source? That is not luck. That is confrontation happening beyond your sight. Psychologically, you questioned yourself. You wondered if you were too intense, too intimidating, too much. But what if the intimidation was never yours? What if it was the authority guarding you? The lion does not wait for harm. It stands at the perimeter. It studies movement. It discerns intention. And when darkness approaches with hunger, it finds teeth instead. Your rejection was not random. Your isolation was not accidental. Predators do not stalk common ground. They stalk rare ground. You are rare ground. That is why your life has felt like warfare instead of ease. But warfare means value, and the lion means ownership. Dark observers hesitate around you because they sense something ancient standing beside you, something they cannot outrank. You are not being hunted. You are being guarded. And once you understand that, fear dissolves. Stand firm. You are not alone in your battles. You are backed by authority that does not sleep, and this is only the beginning. Second, the Soaring Eagle. You have sensed it, moments when something warned you before anything happened. A shift in your spirit, a quiet check in your gut, a knowing without evidence, and you doubted it. You called it overthinking. You called it anxiety. You called it imagination. But it was altitude. The eagle assigned to you does not operate where humans operate. It does not scan from the ground. It scans from above. While others react, you anticipate. While others are blindsided, you adjust. While others walk blind, your covering sees. Have you noticed how certain traps never fully close around you? How betrayal reveals itself early? How manipulation feels exposed before it matures? That is not coincidence. That is surveillance being intercepted. Dark observers attempt to study your patterns. They try to map your reactions. They attempt to predict your emotional triggers. But the eagle flies higher than their analysis. Before their plan descends, it is already seen. Before their whisper reaches your mind, it is already flagged. Before their monitoring touches your emotions, it is already disrupted. You are not paranoid. You are protected by elevation. The world calls you hyper-aware. The world says you are too sensitive. But sensitivity at high altitude is strategy. You feel energy shifts because your covering detects movement in realms others cannot perceive. You withdraw at precise moments because you are being repositioned. You lose interest in environments right before they turn toxic. That is not instability. That is divine intelligence. Listen carefully. The eagle does not fight at ground level. It circles, it observes, it waits. And when the time is right, it dives with precision. Have you ever watched how quickly certain threats collapse once you become aware of them? How exposure alone dismantles what was forming in secret? Darkness survives in concealment, but you carry higher vision, and higher vision ruins hidden agendas. Your isolation was not punishment, it was altitude training. You were lifted above circles that could not see what you see, above conversations that could not comprehend what you discern, above environments that would have dulled your edge. Chosen ones are not just guarded on the perimeter. They are elevated in perception. The enemy studies from below. Your covering scans from above. That is why confusion rarely lasts long around you. That is why deception feels uncomfortable in your presence. That is why people who try to figure you out end up exposed instead. Because what tries to analyze you becomes analyzed. What tries to observe you becomes visible. You are not under surveillance without counter-surveillance. You are not being studied without protection. Stand in that. Trust what you sense. Trust the early warnings. Trust the altitude. The eagle is not defensive. It is dominant in the sky, and this is only rising higher. Third, the Serpent of Discernment. You were taught to fear that word, serpent. You were told it only meant deception, only meant danger, only meant the enemy. But you felt something different. You sensed wisdom moving in you that others did not have. You could read motives without being told. You could feel when someone smiled with their mouth but not with their spirit. And they called you suspicious. They said you overanalyze. They said you think too much. But you were not overthinking. You were discerning. This serpent is not the serpent of corruption. It is the serpent of holy intelligence. It moves low. It listens closely. It studies vibration. Have you ever walked away from someone and felt slimy energy on your spirit? Have you ever felt drained after a conversation that looked harmless on the surface? That was intrusion, not physical, energetic. There are dark observers who do not just watch from afar. They attempt to enter through suggestion, through subtle words, through emotional hooks. They coil around your name in private conversations. They project thoughts toward you. They attempt to implant doubt. But the serpent assigned to you sheds skins. Old attacks cannot cling. Old labels cannot stick. Old accusations slide off. You change too quickly. You grow too fast. You out-evolve the narrative. That is why people say you've changed. Yes, you have. Because what tried to define you lost access. When manipulation coils around your reputation, the serpent uncoils the lie. Quietly, strategically, it does not argue, it reveals. Darkness relies on hidden venom, whispers, psychological poison, energy siphoning masked as concern. But venom only works when it stays inside, and you have felt it happen. Someone tried to plant doubt, and suddenly they became exposed. Their words contradicted themselves. Their intent surfaced. You did not attack them. Truth did. That is not luck. That is reversal. The Serpent of Discernment does not just protect you from intrusion, it returns hidden venom to its source. Have you noticed how people who secretly envy you end up unraveling? How those who attempt to curse your progress experience confusion instead? That is not revenge. That is spiritual law. You are not naive, you are aware. The world calls awareness paranoia, but the chosen call it survival. You were isolated because your discernment made others uncomfortable. You could not be easily manipulated. You could not be emotionally controlled. You could not be spiritually sedated. That threatened fragile systems, so they labeled you difficult, guarded, intense. But intensity is armor. Discernment is protection. You are not overly sensitive. You are spiritually intelligent. Stand firm in that. Trust what your spirit detects even when your mind cannot explain it. The serpent moves silently, and so do you. But silence does not mean weakness. It means precision, and precision makes you dangerous to darkness. Fourth, the Stag of Sudden Escape. You have lived this pattern. Pressure builds, walls feel close, circumstances tighten, and just when it looks sealed, an opening appears. Have you noticed it? A last-minute shift, a door you did not knock on, a conversation that reroutes your entire direction. You thought it was coincidence. It was interruption. Dark observers study patterns. They track behavior. They wait for predictability. Routine is their weapon. Timing is their strategy. But you have never been easy to map. Just when they think they understand your rhythm, you change pace. Just when they assume you will stay, you move. Just when they expect compliance, you withdraw. And even you do not always know why. That is not instability. That is divine disruption. The stag assigned to you is built for terrain others cannot survive. It moves through forests without leaving a trail. It leaps over traps without triggering them. It senses vibration before danger closes in. Have you ever felt the urge to leave something that looked stable, a job, a relationship, a circle, and later you discovered what would have unfolded if you had stayed? That was not fear. That was foresight. You were moved before the net tightened. The world says you can't stick with anything. The world calls you restless, but restlessness in the chosen is often redirection. The enemy studies your habits. He waits for your comfort. He watches for your attachment. But the stag does not attach to ground that will soon collapse. It leaps, suddenly, decisively, and when it moves, timing shifts. Have you noticed how certain plans against you lose synchronization? How people who tried to corner you miss their window? How betrayal often reveals itself too late to harm you fully? What should have captured you loses its timing. That is not luck, that is spiritual choreography. Your life has felt unstable because it is mobile. You were never meant to be stationary prey. You were designed as untouchable movement. Isolation was not rejection, it was relocation. Loss was not punishment, it was extraction. You thought you were starting over, but you were escaping unseen snares. Listen carefully. Darkness cannot trap what it cannot predict. And you are unpredictable by design. The stag does not fight every hunter. It outruns strategy. It shifts terrain. It breaks patterns. It refuses confinement. And so do you. When pressure builds again, and it will, do not panic. Watch for the opening. Move when instructed. Do not hesitate. Because delay is the only thing traps rely on. You are not cornered. You are positioned for sudden escape. And what tries to contain you will once again miss its moment. Fifth, the white horse. This is where everything shifts. You thought you were barely making it. You thought you were surviving attacks. You thought you were just enduring warfare. But have you noticed something? Every time resistance rises, you move faster. Every time opposition thickens, something in you strengthens. That is not survival. That is momentum. The white horse assigned to you does not walk cautiously. It does not tiptoe around resistance. It charges, and it only moves with permission. Divine permission. There is a difference between ambition and authorization. The world strives, you advance. When the enemy builds a blockade, you feel pressure. Yes, but then something unusual happens. Acceleration. Opportunities appear in hostile seasons. Growth increases during conflict. Influence expands under scrutiny. Have you ever wondered why your greatest breakthroughs come when warfare intensifies? Because the white horse moves when destiny refuses to slow down. Dark observers expect intimidation to freeze you. They expect fear to stall you. They expect delay to exhaust you. But when pressure comes, you do not retreat. You surge. That is not ego. That is assignment. You were never meant to crawl through your calling. You were meant to ride into it. The white horse represents forward authority, not defensive posture, not passive endurance. Forward authority. You feel it when something tries to stop you. A fire rises instead of fear. Clarity sharpens instead of confusion. Resolve hardens instead of weakness. That is power awareness. Listen carefully. Warfare intensifies around those who carry velocity. The enemy does not waste energy blocking stagnant lives. He builds barricades in front of movement. And your life has always been movement. That is why setbacks never lasted long. That is why closed doors redirected instead of destroyed you. That is why criticism refined you instead of silencing you. You are not just shielded, you are mobilized. The white horse does not represent escape. It represents conquest. You thought the struggle meant you were behind. But what if it meant you were advancing into territory darkness wanted to keep? Have you noticed how some people grow uneasy when you accelerate? How environments shift when you refuse to shrink? How resistance spikes when you gain clarity? That is because momentum threatens control, and you carry momentum. This is not about ego-driven dominance. This is about destiny-driven movement. Stand tall. Do not slow down to make others comfortable. Do not dim your pace to reduce tension. The tension confirms you are moving, and movement confirms you are authorized. You are not racing blindly. You are riding with covering. And when you move with divine permission, blockades become battlegrounds you pass through, not obstacles you stop at. You are not barely surviving spiritual warfare. You are advancing through it, and this is only gaining speed. Sixth, the Owl of Midnight Vigil. This is deeper than movement. This is deeper than escape. This is what happens when you are unaware. You have had nights that felt heavy, sleep that felt interrupted, dreams that felt intense. You woke up tired without explanation. You felt emotional waves with no visible trigger, and you questioned yourself. Was it stress? Was it overthinking? Was it weakness? No. Some attacks are time for vulnerability. Dark observers do not only move in daylight confrontation, they move in subtle hours, in emotional lows, in moments when your guard is down. But you are not unguarded at night. The owl assigned to you does not panic in darkness. It thrives there. It sees clearly where others are blind. It rotates its head in full awareness. It detects movement in silence. While you rest, it watches. While you sleep, it scans. While your conscious mind is offline, supervision remains active. Have you ever noticed how certain spiritual heaviness lifts by morning? How moods that felt oppressive suddenly dissolve? How plans against you never fully manifest after intense nights? Night assignments collapse, not because you fought them, but because something watched over you. The world says darkness is absence of light, but in your life, darkness becomes exposure. You were afraid of night seasons. You feared isolation. You feared silent battles no one could see. But what if those silent seasons were training grounds? What if your sensitivity to night warfare is proof that you are considered a threat? Darkness targets potential. It does not waste midnight energy on the ordinary. And you have never been ordinary. The owl does not scream. It does not announce its defense. It is quiet, precise, unshaken. And you are learning that same composure. You do not need to react to every unseen shift. You do not need to fight every invisible battle. Some protection operates without your involvement. That should change how you rest. Rest is not negligence. Rest is trust. Have you struggled to fully relax, to feel safe when nothing is visibly wrong? That tension came from awareness. But awareness must mature into confidence. You are not left exposed during low moments. You are not abandoned in emotional dips. You are not defenseless when your strength feels thin. There is supervision you cannot see. There is authority assigned to your vulnerability. Midnight is not your weakness. It is monitored territory. Stand firm in that. Sleep without fear. Recover without guilt. Because while darkness attempts silent operations, silent guardians remain, and what tries to move under cover of night finds itself watched. Seventh, the Lamb of Purity. This is where the warfare becomes legal. You have felt accusation before, not always spoken out loud, but implied, projected, suggested. A subtle weight of guilt, a whisper of shame, a narrative trying to attach itself to your name. Have you noticed it moments when you begin questioning yourself without clear cause? When old mistakes resurface suddenly? When condemnation feels heavier than conviction? That is strategy. Dark observers rely on legal access. They look for openings through regret, through hidden compromise, through unhealed shame. Because guilt weakens authority. Shame distorts identity, and distorted identity is easier to monitor. But here is the revelation. The lamb assigned to you does not fight through aggression. It disarms through purity. This is not fragility. This is frequency. Purity is not about perfection. It is about alignment. When your heart is aligned, accusation cannot root. When your intentions are clean, lies cannot stick. Have you noticed how certain false narratives about you collapse quickly? How attempts to smear your character feel unstable? How people who try to paint you dark eventually expose themselves? That is not reputation management. That is nullification. The lamb steps into the courtroom of the unseen and cancels claims before they gain ground. You wondered why integrity has cost you friendships, why honesty has isolated you, why you refuse shortcuts others embraced, because corruption creates access, and you were never meant to be accessible. The world says bend a little, compromise a little, blend in, but blending would have created entry points, and you are too marked for that. Purity is not weakness, it is untouchable frequency. Darkness cannot manipulate what it cannot accuse. And when you refuse corruption, surveillance loses its foothold. Have you noticed how certain temptations feel unusually intense around you? How pressure increases when you choose the higher path? That is because integrity threatens control. You are not tested because you are fragile. You are tested because you are powerful. And every time you refuse the lower option, you strengthen your perimeter. You thought obedience made you small. It made you protected. You thought restraint made you limited. It made you sovereign. The lamb does not roar, it stands. And its standing is enough to silence accusation. Stand in your integrity. Refuse hidden compromise. Guard your inner alignment. Because the more untouchable your heart becomes, the less darkness can interact with you at all. This is not about image. This is about access, and access has been denied. Eighth, the Dragon Slayer Hawk. This is where the tone changes. You have felt it. The warfare stopped feeling random. The attacks stopped feeling scattered. The pressure became targeted, not harassment, strategy. Have you noticed how certain cycles in your life suddenly broke? How patterns that haunted you for years just fractured? How environments that monitored you lost grip all at once? That was not coincidence. That was escalation in your favor. At this level, protection is no longer passive. Angels do not only shield you, they advance for you. The hawk does not circle aimlessly. It locks onto architects. It does not chase symptoms. It hunts the source. Dark observers operate through systems, through networks, through hidden agreements. They assign watchers. They commission surveillance. They build strongholds around rising destinies. And you felt the weight of that. You felt like resistance was organized, like opposition was coordinated, like something bigger than individuals was studying you. You were right, but here is what they did not anticipate. You carry offensive backing. The Dragon Slayer Hawk does not fear large forces. It dives at the head. Have you ever experienced a sudden dismantling, a powerful figure losing influence, a toxic system collapsing unexpectedly, a long-standing obstruction crumbling without warning? That is not random justice. That is strategic dismantling. The warfare shifted because you crossed a threshold. You matured. You endured. You refused compromise. And now the battle is no longer about irritating you. It is about removing what was assigned to suppress you. Listen carefully. Strongholds fracture when the chosen stop doubting their assignment. You spent years questioning yourself, questioning your difference, questioning your isolation. But once you began standing in clarity, the air changed. Resistance intensified for a moment. Then structures started shaking, because darkness can harass the uncertain, but it fears the awakened. You are no longer being tested for survival. You are being positioned for dominance. The hawk does not flap wildly, it waits. Then it strikes with precision. And when it strikes, it aims high, not at distractions, at commanders. You may not see every shift immediately, but behind the scenes, architecture is collapsing. What commissioned surveillance is losing funding in the unseen. What authorized monitoring is being stripped of rank. You are not just escaping traps. You are outgrowing the system that built them. That is why pressure feels intense right now. Pressure precedes collapse. Stay steady, do not retreat. You are not under random attack. You are in strategic transition. And when this layer finishes dismantling, the final creature activates. Ninth, the living flame seraph. This is not protection as you understood it before. This is consecration. You have felt moments when your presence alone shifts a room, when hostility cannot sustain itself around you, when tension breaks without you speaking a word. That is not personality, that is fire. Not destructive chaos, holy fire. This creature does not stand at the perimeter. It surrounds you. It does not only block intrusion, it transforms atmosphere. Have you noticed how certain people suddenly distance themselves without conflict? How observers who once monitored you go silent? How resistance loses courage when you step into clarity? Because this is no longer about shielding, it is about consequence. When the living flame activates, approach becomes costly. Dark observers cannot linger without exposure. They cannot study you without being revealed. They cannot analyze you without being judged by the light around you. This is where you shift from target to territory. You are no longer something to monitor. You are sovereign ground, and sovereignty changes the rules. Before darkness tried to study you, now it hesitates. Before it tracked your movement, now it fears proximity. Why? Because fire does not negotiate. Fire purifies, fire exposes, fire consumes what does not belong. You wondered why your life has required so much refinement, why you endured isolation, why pressure kept increasing. It was not to weaken you, it was to ignite you. Consecrated fire cannot be faked. It is earned through surrender, through endurance, through alignment, and you endured. You stayed clean when compromise was easier. You stayed aware when ignorance was safer. You stayed faithful when retreat was tempting. Now the fire rests on you. This is why you feel different, not superior, but sealed. Darkness stops watching when it realizes observation brings exposure, and you have become exposure. Stand in that. Do not shrink. Do not apologize for the intensity around you. You are not too much. You are too illuminated. You are chosen, not by accident, not by ego, not by random fate. Chosen by design. Every battle confirmed it. Every rejection proved it. Every midnight test refined it. You were never ordinary. You were being prepared. Prepared to carry fire. Prepared to walk as sovereign territory. Prepared to become untouchable by ordinary forces. Let this settle in you. You are protected. You are covered. You are guarded by forces that do not sleep. If this truth resonates, declare it. Comment 9 below as a seal of alignment. Stand with the identity you now understand. Subscribe if you are ready to keep awakening deeper layers, because this is not the end of your revelation. It is the ignition of it. You are chosen, and nothing assigned against you will prevail. Nothing. The fire has spoken.